start out by asking everyone the same question. Going down the line, starting with you, Brendan, tell us your personal story. What led you to not just be a conservative, but also a political activist for the conservative cause?
Sure. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I was born and raised in poverty, like a lot of African American kids. My mother, I was raised by a single mom, and I watched her struggle. Right. So I was born and raised in Brooklyn. I grew up in poverty, like a lot of black kids. I attended public schools. I come from a heavily Democratic family. My mom, even though she's a far leftist, like when I say that this woman is like liberal, like she is the epitome of liberalism. She always taught me the value of hard work, self-reliance, individualism. Never use your race or your class as an excuse to say you're not. And I kind of learned it the hard way because I was kicked out the house when I was 13. So I really had to learn how to stand on my own two feet. As I got older and I got more involved in politics, I had to figure out where did my ideology align with when it comes down to partisanship. Did I want to become a Republican or a Democrat? And I went back to the principles that my mother taught me. And that's how I ended up becoming a conservative. And right now, I'm the president of the Brooklyn Young Republican Club, and we're fighting to bring conservatism back to Brooklyn. And it's definitely been an uphill battle. It hasn't been easy. But since I took over, we've definitely been diversifying. We've had a lot more kids, millennials, college students, come in. People from all different ethnicities, black, white, Asian, people from all over the world. We have people coming as far away from India, to hear what we have to say. And I think that it's definitely a great movement. It's something that's going to take place, something that's happening gradually. Yeah, we're basically on the move, and we're spreading conservatism.
Well, I've always been in love with American history. My political journey really didn't start until my college years. I was raised in kind of, I guess you could say, a nerd household. We had very stimulating conversations around the dinner table about current events.
Your dad's here, so
sorry, Dad. Sorry, Mom.
Mom? Wait. Is she talking about you?
She is.
Okay. Okay. I don't see your dad as a nerd.
Don't tell her that. So we had very stimulating conversations around the dinner table, about current events, American presidents, all across the board. And so I went to college, and I soon realized that not everyone had those kind of discussions around the dinner table, and not everyone was raised with the principles that my family had instilled in me, which was hard work, personal responsibility, and accountability, and, being the best that you can be. My parents always told me I could be absolutely anything I wanted to be. So I got on college campuses, and I was like, wait, what's up? There was people that weren't taking responsibility for their actions. And I found myself, missing those dinner conversations, and I looked forward to coming home, on breaks to, talk about politics and current events. So that kind of, ignited my interest in taking, a stance in politics. So I was thinking, how can I, get my opinion out there? And I was still scared. I was in college, and I was scared to lose all my Facebook friends because that was, the drama of the day. So I sat in my college apartment, and I made an anonymous Twitter account, and it was called FFL. And I used it just kind of as a personal sounding board for my personal soapbox of political opinions and current events, but then also what tied in was the very personal events of my own life, the highs and lows I went through as a 22-year-old woman. And what I soon found was it was beginning to resonate with a lot of women across the country in college from ages 16 to 30. And they were really, pushing FFL to be a leader in conservatism amongst the young women demographic. So I felt like I had to do more now that I had turned this soapbox into kind of a rallying call. So we have, expanded from what started as a Twitter account. We have morphed into America's leading social movement for young conservative women, and we show a sense of pride of what it is to be a conservative woman in a world that is not always very friendly to us. And we do that through our conservative lifestyle blog postings on our website. We do it through our apparel and accessories like the elephant skirts. And then we also do it through our significant social media presence and our ambassador programs.
That's awesome. Where can we get the apparel?
FutureFemaleLeader.com or down in our booth at the CPAC Hub.
Andrea.
Okay. Does that work? Okay. So I moved here with my family when I was 4, and so I was raised in a traditional conservative household, and with also a tradition of really disliking socialism. But I was not interested in politics or any of that because in high school I just wanted to survive high school, and then just get good grades and then do well on the tennis team and get into UCLA. And then at UCLA I started becoming aware of the differences between Republicans and Democrats. And I had an urge to join, but then I noticed that would also have affect kind of my social life. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to pick and choose my battles. I'm just going to focus on getting good grades and having fun, and I'll just put that to the side. Once I graduated, that's when the urge did not leave me, because out of my entire graduating class, or all my friends of my graduating class, I was the only one that still left a conservative, and I also was an art history major. So that means I was working in the art world. And then I happened to get my first internship was at the Santa Monica Museum of Art, which is a modern art museum, and it's also Santa Monica, which is the equivalent of Berkeley. And I now started to see how they saw conservatives. And I really thought that the way they spoke of conservatives was really awful. And that's why I was like, I need to start seeking out other people that think like me, because a part of my personality was actually shutting down because I couldn't share that side of me. A lot of my friendships had become more surface level. And that's fine because we all have different types of friends and different levels, but I didn't have anyone that shared my core beliefs. And so I decided then in 2008 is when I decided to start seeking out others. And I looked up Republican clubs in Los Angeles, and actually I looked up young Republican clubs in Los Angeles. I couldn't find anything. I actually had to drive 2 hours to Long Beach. It's not that far away from LA, but in traffic it's 2 hours. And that club had 4 people there, and within 2 months it dissolved. So I was completely discouraged. I was like, okay, where am I I can't be in a city of 10 million people. I can't be the only person who's 24 and who is a conservative. So then I started looking for the other Republican clubs in town, and I started going. And of course, a lot of the people there, I loved it, but they were as old as my grandparents. And I was like, okay, how is this possible? But I was like, I still needed the outlet. So I kept going. I was like, I'm going to adopt these people as my grandparents. I'm going to make the most of my 1 month, they had one meeting a month at a Denny's. And then that's a lot of these clubs are. Denny's are, home base for a lot of groups. And I would see once in a while, I'd see one young person come, but they'd sit on the opposite side of the room, and the meetings would last until 10:30 at night, and then everyone was rushing home. So that's when the idea came to me. I was like, okay, I'm going to try to start a group, and that could be a success or a complete failure, and just see, because I just wanted to meet a few other people that were like-minded so that I had some conservative friends. So in January of 2009, when our president was inaugurated, after that, I was like, that's the perfect time. I will, launch this. And there was 3 people there was 3 of us at our first meeting. And 7 years later, they're still with me today on my leadership. We laid out our vision, the principles that day, and that's still been our guiding compass for the last 7 years. And since then, we've now grown to 400 members. And this is in LA, which is a hugely liberal city. So that's kind of what led me to become an activist. But it was really almost a feeling of oppression that I had after graduating college, because you couldn't talk. You'd risk your job or at least your reputation at work. And so I think when you're pushed that that moment. I mean, that's when you have to seek others, because it's one of these things, it's like it's for your own survival. So that's really what led me now to become, and now I live and breathe this.
Well, and following up with that, what difficulties do you face with your, not necessarily your family, but your friends? You're in California, within the general community, you're an outspoken conservative. So do you find yourself in difficult situations often?
I pick and choose my battles. At work, I do not discuss politics because I'm aware that it could affect my job. So I definitely would not, in California or in LA, you just can't. So what I've done is, it depends on I know how to turn off the switch. Let's just say I'm very strategic. At work, I don't talk about it unless we become friends outside of work, and then I opened up and I just plant seeds. And when people start learning, this side of me, what I do is, first of all, I kill them with kindness. And then I ask them, if we do open up that gate where we're talking about politics, I ask them questions about their beliefs and to get clarity. And then I just offer a different viewpoint. But I don't try to hammer it over their head on the first attempt. I really see someone's conversion. It's almost like a 2-year project, because no one wants to be beat over the head.
So you're not taking an aggressive approach with people.
No, I'm very.
Sharing their ideas and then backing off, and if somebody's not receptive, you're not going to keep pushing.
No, exactly. I mean, it's much more effective for me to motivate the people that are conservatives but just they're not active, and there's plenty of them. Like, we are a minority in this room and within the conservative world. So in the outside world, I pick and choose my battles, and I focus more on developing people who are conservative but more passive into activists. That's my approach.
Brandon, do you agree with that? How do you deal with your family, especially, and people who don't agree with you? How do you handle that?
Well, actually,
Similarly?
yeah, so to speak. But I definitely agree with Andrea that you have to be very smart. Okay. Yeah. So you definitely have to be very smart about the topics that you discuss, especially if it's regarding social issues. When it comes down to my family, my friends, I'm a Republican. I'm a proud Republican. Like, I'm very aggressive when it comes down to my political beliefs. But what I like to do is I always try to keep an open mind, because I realize the majority of my people, particularly within the Black community, they tend to lean Democrat. So I ask some questions. I'm like, well, what is it? Why do you vote Democrat? What are the things that you support? And most millennials will say, well, when I graduate college, I want to make 6 figures. I'm like, okay, well, you want to make 6 figures, that's a great thing. So let's say you do make that income bracket. Do you want the government excessively taxing you, especially if you worked hard for it? And they'll say no. I'm like, well, let's talk about small businesses. How do you feel about entrepreneurship? And people say, well, capitalism, it forces greed and so forth. So now I'll probably ask them a question like, when was the last time you sold a book on eBay? Because a lot of us college students we do that. And they'll say, well, I did it just last week. I'm like, well, congratulations, you're participating in the free market system.
That's great.
And basically what I always tell my people is we need to be very, very intelligent in how we approach everyday kids. We need to pull out their interests, and we need to make sure that their interests match our interests, and we need to show them that, hey, listen, deep down inside, you may just very well have conservative principles. You just don't know it yet. So I don't approach people as, hey, I'm a Black Republican. I don't usually do that. I don't go on college campuses with suits and ties and stuff. I wear, jeans and a hoodie and chucks. Yeah, because people, especially millennials, they have to be able to relate to us.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not relatable, you can have the best policies and the best ideas in the world, but if you don't know how to market and brand them to everyday people, you're not going to care. You're not going to do it on the day. So,
do you find that most people who are resisting your message in your community, do you think that they have a genuine disagreement, or is this more than clinging to long-held stereotypes about who can and can't be a conservative?
I would say the latter. I could speak for the Black community because I'm a son of the Black community. For the past 50 years since LBJ's war on poverty, most blacks, we lean towards the left. And, when I ask people, well, why do you vote the way you do? Why do you support the candidates that you do? They'll say, well, my mother supports them, my dad supports them. It's just been that way. It's just a generational thing. So that's why I always try to focus more on the issues rather than, the policies itself.
Amanda, you were anonymous at one point, and now you're not. So how did that go?
Well, I've gotten more confident, and it gave me the platform to kind of build my ideas and my opinions to a point where I felt very confident about it. And so now I'm not afraid to speak out, and I want to be an advocate to speak out because I don't want every girl to have to make an anonymous Twitter account just to share her political opinions.
And how do you push back? Do you push back on people, or are you more laid back? You don't seem to me like one that would be super laid back. You seem more like me.
Well, right. Well, surprisingly, on social media, everyone thinks they're a keyboard warrior when they're behind a computer screen. So I think all the girls in the front row can vouch for me. We get a lot of comments, a lot of negative comments said about us, and I think that's something that a lot of young conservative females battle is the stereotypes. I'm told because I'm a female conservative that I hate myself. I'm told that because I'm a young conservative, I adopted my parents' views. I'm told because I'm a conservative, I'm heartless. And let me be crystal clear. One, I don't think there's anything more empowering than not needing the government to succeed and being informed and involved in the political process and thinking for yourself. Two, I think that being involved in any level politically at a young age is something to be proud of and praised. And three, I don't think that conservatives are heartless. We provide Americans the best version to achieve their own version of the American dream with our policies, and I truly do believe that. And so, combating those stereotypes can be difficult as they are, for my organization. So I usually don't, combat attacks that are name calling because 98% of them are just name calling. You can't reason with them. They're beyond belief. But I will, be open to sharing my ideas and having a productive discussion. Because, the more you learn about the other side, the more informed you can be in your own political opinions.
Andrea, what do you, for your vantage point, what do you think the potential is for expanding the conservative movement within your community?
I really think it's limitless. I mean, in LA alone, and there's room for 5 more of my groups because it's so big, and that right now I have people coming from opposite spectrums of the city, from Pasadena to even to Santa Monica, which I don't know who's been to LA, but these are opposite. They're really like at least an hour apart, and then traffic gets more. And then I've got people from Manhattan Beach, so it's just these pockets that are really about almost 2 hours apart from each other. So alone, I feel like there's more people I can reach within my own city. But I also feel like there's this model that we've created can be replicated in all cities across the country, in all the major cities. And that's actually what we're working on, because right now we're going to launch our first chapter, which is going to be in North Carolina. One of my members from my group, she moved there, and so she's going to spearhead it over there. There's been about 10 people, or 10 to 15 people from my group that have moved to other cities, and I stay in touch with them because we're friends. And I ask them, so once they settle in, they've got their job. I was like, are you getting involved? And across the board, I've heard the answer is no. That's when I realized that there's a huge need that needs to be met out there. And unfortunately, there's a underserved population that the GOP is not reaching. And that's actually, I believe it's 2 generations. It's the 20s and the 30-year-olds and the 40 and the 50-year-olds. And my focus is the 20 and the 30-year-olds. But I feel like right now it just comes down to manpower and support, because I feel like it's really limitless. This is such a simple model that can be replicated anywhere.
Following up on that, 3 things that conservatism needs to do better to grow and thrive.
3 things.
And that's a question for all of you. 3 things that you think do better.
I think for sure, I mean, one of them is that the GOP needs to reach out to those two demographics that I just mentioned that are underserved. They need to reach out to the young professionals. People are really involved in college, and it's also it's also because of the logistics of college. You're very close to your friends. It's a lot easier in that hub. And there's a huge gap between that and then people up to when they're in their 60s, when their kids are grown up, maybe some of them are retired. There's 40 years that are not being reached out to. So the GOP needs to come up with, amongst many other groups that they need to reach out to, those groups need to be reached out to definitely.
Amanda?
I would say to be better communicators and marketers. The GOP has had a hard time, relating with a lot of young voters, minority voters, women voters. And Barack Obama, won all three of those groups by huge margins. And I think that, we just need to be effectively communicate our conservatism to those types of groups. And that doesn't mean pandering or tailoring policy issues to fit a certain faction of voters. It's just to make it relatable to them. A lot with our organization, we're very, girly, and we are not shy about it. And, that is a way for us to tie in pop culture and things that go on in their everyday life and bring it back to politics. And sometimes it's a little tongue-in-cheek and funny, and you just can't help but smile, but it, resonates with them. And then that's always the active step for them to, get engaged in the political process and current events, something as simple as just a, funny quote. And so I think that that's important, that they, communicate, be better marketers, and, really learn to resonate with, a bunch of different factions of voters.
Well, I could just tell you, as far as how we do it, I always tell my board and my club members that we have to focus more on how we market our policies. We're always talking about the free market system, the economy and big business and whatnot, but it's really the same thing in politics. I found that a lot of Republicans, to our own discredit, so to speak, we focus more on the issues that we don't support. Everyone knows what Republicans don't support. The list goes on and on, but we really don't put enough emphasis on the things that we do support. And I think that we have a lot of great ideas, everything from school choice. Parents, they want to know, where am I going to send my kids? Why should the government or the state force parents to send their kids to, let's say, a public school in their neighborhood? That's great if you live in an affluent neighborhood, but what happens if you grow up poor and the public school systems in your local community is failing? The free market system. It doesn't just benefit entrepreneurs, it benefits consumers because there's competition, and it also creates jobs, which could be a really, really great tool in uplifting people out of poverty. And, it's interesting, not to go off, some foreign policy or anything, but, I was doing some research and it's interesting. Over the past, let's say, 30, 40 years, since the 1970s and 60s, over 2 billion people all over the world have been lifted out of poverty. And it wasn't because of the United Nations, it wasn't because of no foreign aid that the U.S. provided, which most of that foreign aid go into the pockets of, diplomats and world leaders all over the globe, but it was because of free enterprise. It was because of trade. I think that we can definitely spread our message if we focus on the issues that really matter to people.
That's great. Do you think our leaders are out of touch? And yes or no? And what can they do to help promote our cause? I think we're missing something there. Who wants to take that first?
I can jump in. I have a lot to say on this subject. Right, what I said in the past question, it's really just resonating in relatability. I don't know, what's his name? Adam from The Hangover. Do y'all know him, the actor? He has a podcast, and he had Barack Obama on, and that is a very untraditional media outlet. And he had him on to do an interview about healthcare to help. He had an audience of young voters that they needed to help, do this system that he wanted to implement. And so he went on this radio interview and talked about, poked fun at himself. Barack Obama, made jokes on himself, was just joking around, was very relatable. And then about halfway through, he got into talking about healthcare and how everyone needs to sign up for Obamacare. And while I am not a supporter of Obamacare, I think that marketing was genius. In that sign-up period, that radio interview link was the top referral to healthcare.gov. And that is converting, someone with Alan from The Hangover. Someone as crazy as that. And he was just reaching so many politically apathetic voters that just didn't care, and that he interested them and he reached those groups. And I think that we have a huge opportunity within the GOP and the conservative movement to be more relatable. I know last spring Mitt Romney was on The Tonight Show, and it was past my bedtime, but I caught it on YouTube the next day. And I was blown away. I was like, who is this Mitt? This is crazy. I love this man. He's so relatable right now. This is crazy. I was laughing, and I was like, where was this on the 2012? People painted him out of touch, didn't connect with people, didn't resonate. And here he was on The Tonight Show, making the case after he'd already won and lost. And I was just, where was this? So I think that proves, the kind of untraditional media outlets that our candidates and elected officials can take advantage of and kind of work to get their message out to a broader audience.
So I guess run Screebus on late night TV.
Yes, let's get that going.
Andrea?
There's two things that I think that I would like to see them do. One is they need to have a positive political agenda. And what I mean by that is that it's not enough to just be against Democrat. They need to give people something to be in favor of. And I think that I would like to see a new contract with America happen again. But instead of this time, that they actually stick to it for perpetuity, because last time it only lasted for 2 terms. And that, I think, would make a tremendous difference. Because the way that we're constantly responding and against Democrats, but that's not enough. You have to give something for people to stand for. When the contract with America happened, you had people that even in the South, there are Republicans in the South, that's not what I'm saying, but there are people that actually now, because the Republicans actually stood in favor of something, they actually were now voting for Republicans in a way that they had never been done before. So that is one thing that I think that definitely needs to be worked on. And the second one is that they just need to stick to their principles. Democrats, one thing that I admire about Democrats is that they fight, they get knocked down, they bleed, but they get right back up. Republicans get knocked down, and they run away. And that's over when we had that with Arnold Schwarzenegger in California. He started off, it seemed like he was starting off on the right foot, and then as soon as he was trying to get rid of a lot of the unions, as soon as the left started attacking him and the policies, he just gave in and he became one of them. So, and this is over and over across the country with a lot of our, Republican officials. So if they just did those 2 simple things, it would be landslides. This is so simple that we could actually, we would start winning elections again. I really do believe that from the local elections to the national elections.
I would definitely say yes. Republicans are, yes, seriously. And the reason why I say that is because, like I said, I like to focus my attention more on the youth. And I think this is a big common misconception that a lot of people have, that young people don't care about politics. Kids care about politics. Politics, it affects everything. So kids, they definitely have an interest in it, especially when you think about the rising cost of tuition and how I'm going to find a job after I graduate. So, but what I found with Republicans is that you have a lot of narcissists, within the Republican Party. And the question is always, how do we win elections? How do we win? How do we get these endorsements? Who's going to back us? I think that we've been so focused on the establishment and, trying to win elections that we've forgotten how to win hearts and minds of everyday people. People, though they may care about political issues, they don't really care about your political issues or my political issues. They don't care about how we're going to get elected. You know, that is a concern. They want to know, you know, where am I going to send my kids to school? You know, how many taxes do I have to pay? You know,
Can I get home from work on time?
yeah, exactly. You know, stuff like that. So we definitely need to make the people's interests our interests.
I think we end at 5, but I wanted to see if anybody in the audience might have a question for our panel.
Of course.
I was wondering how we should be reaching out to minorities, because everything we're doing is seen as like pandering and giving them what they want, or it's not real. Like the whole Ben Carson actually having a chance, that wasn't real because he was black and we were just trying to seem like we were racially diverse. So how do we make people know that our policies are for everyone and not just the rich, angry, white old men?
That's a great question.
Yeah, no, that's a really awesome question. I'm actually a former Ben Carson supporter since I guess he suspended his campaign, so I'm not going to support him. But you know, that's a really good question. I think the issue with my people, particularly African Americans, is that you're not just dealing with people who, let's say, 10% of our population are unemployed and 40% are living in poverty. You know, it's more than just about economics. It's also about our history. You know, with blacks, we tend to focus more on race, you know, discrimination, things of that nature. What I would suggest to Republicans is, one, you need to get candidates that are best reflect minority communities. You know, not just blacks, but with Latinos. You know, it'll be very hard for me to go into a Latino community and talk about, you know, immigration, because I'm not an immigrant. You know, I've never been through the process. I have immigrant friends, but I've never been through it. And vice versa, it'll be hard for, let's say, you know, a white person or Latino to go into the black community and address their issues. I think that
I'm going to jump in there. But I think that it is important, no matter what the color of your skin,
right,
as a candidate, that you don't shy away. My husband was in the state house in Virginia in a 65% Obama race, you know, as a conservative Republican, Latino, but heavy African American community.
Right.
And so what did we do? We went to church every Sunday. We worshiped with the community. We went to their picnics. We went to their birthday parties. And so no matter what the color of your skin is, I think we can all agree that we can relate.
Right. And
talk about things that will unite us and not divide us, and issues in that community are family values, largely, worshiping that's important to them.
Right.
And they're a lot of African Americans are pro-life as well.
Right.
So I think we just need to not necessarily need to have a candidate that's black in the black community or Latino. I think we need to have more diversity, but people that are non-black, non-Hispanic can still run in those communities. You just can't show up thinking you're going to get votes.
Right.
But go into their community. Go to them with your message. And I think that that's important too.
Right, no, I agree. And I'm not advocating for, you know, just having strictly Latinos reach out to Latinos and blacks reach out to blacks. But basically my point is, you know, we really need to focus on their issues. And we need to remind them the history between, you know, minorities and the Republican Party. You know, our party was founded predominantly by abolitionists.
Right.
You know, it was 80% of congressional Republicans that voted and legislated the Civil Rights Act of '64. Now, Lyndon Johnson took, you know, responsibility for it because he signed into law, and it was very politically shrewd of him. But, you know, the Republican Party has a very rich history with minorities, and I think that we have the solutions. And one more thing I would like to add to that is we can't just focus on, let's say, race, but we also have to make a moral example of what we're fighting for. You know, if we're going to fight poverty, then we need to provide conservative solutions to end poverty. So, yeah.
Thanks. Another question? Go ahead. Can you
I'm
stand up?
a little tall. At the millennial panel earlier, one of the things that they did was they just brought a bunch of millennials and had them all talk about how they were brought into conservatism or how they brought in the conservative movement. And one of the things they talked about was how you need to reach out to a millennial as an individual, not as a part of a group, not as a black community, Latino community, a woman, or what have you, but as a person. Do you guys agree with that? And if so, why?
Andrea?
Wait, so just to make sure I understood correctly, so that we should reach out to millennials specifically, individually.
That if you're going to reach out to the millennials, as it were, that you should reach out to each person as an individual and their individual issues and the things they individually care about, rather than, oh, well, your group cares about this or your race cares about this, therefore.
Everybody agrees because we're monolithic.
I mean, I think absolutely. It ties right into the previous question. I think that you should always try to understand, like there's one of my favorite books, which is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. The third habit that Stephen Covey teaches is seek first to understand, then to be understood. And I think that definitely applies. I mean, you can't, if something is not a priority to someone and you're talking to them about it, the wall is going to be up. I mean, salespeople know this really well. You have to understand who you're talking to. So, and I think that the best way to reach people actually is on the one-on-one level. I think that is the best. I mean, a lot of the transformations that I've seen in people, and people have been converts, it has been on the one. So I think that's I absolutely agree. I think that's the way to do it. But that's true not just for millennials, that's for anyone. That goes also to the minorities. You have to first understand them, and then you present your ideas. Otherwise, they're going to put that wall up, and they're not going to listen. But you would probably, if someone was trying to sell you something, you'd probably, if just look at it as sales, it's the same principles. Yeah.
Jason, we have one more question.
I have 2 questions. One for Brandon, which is you have the New York State Conservative Party, which is great. If you're not a member of that, I love you. And for Andrea, I want to find out about the social media platforms. I understand you were connected with something called Ricochet. Mm-hmm. Was that helpful? We didn't have that back in the 60s. We were doing the same thing. You're able to harvest people out of some of these social websites for your events, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my group started on Meetup, which is a website where if you want to find a tennis group or a running group, you just find it. So that's how, I could basically say all my friends, I met them online because that's where they found us. And then came the Facebook page. So I think that social media is an amazing way to connect, to reach to people that you never normally would meet. So we definitely, I think conservatives are starting to catch up, not quite there, which is ironic because we're also the business of party. The party of business. But we're not using the tools that we apply in the business world to our own party. And I think that we need to, because otherwise we need to catch up. The left is 30 years ahead of us when it comes to that. And we make it much more complicated than it needs to be.
I'm sorry, what was your question?
Conservative Party.
New York State Conservative Party was, a big deal. Like the United States Senator in 1970.
Right.
On their label, on their line. And they do, it's the only state in the country that I'm aware of that actually where you can run as a conservative and collect votes on the Republican line or any other line as well. So have you talked to the state party people? If not, I'll talk to you afterwards about it. I think Mike Long maybe is on the
Mike Long. Yeah. He's a
So this
really
is
good
the
guy.
great thing about these panels, that you can network after, which is awesome. So I think if all of us get to know each other, and I'm sure we have a lot of people in common, we can definitely continue this discussion. Jameson is a great resource, so I would connect with him, and Mike is a great resource too. Before we go, I like to end my panels with a little fun. So we're going to do just a quick lightning round. I'm going to go down the line, okay? These are really hard questions. I did not give the questions to the panel beforehand, so they're going to be totally shocked by these. And they're really, really hard. Who wants to start? Okay. Brandon, what is something you never leave the house without?
My cell
Cell phone.
Cell phone and highlighter came to mind. That's pretty bad.
Who is the person, we'll start with Andrea, who's the person you admire the most and why?
My parents. They worked 7 days a week for the last 25 years so that we could live in, when we moved to the U.S., we lived in a certain part of San Diego, but then eventually as my parents became familiar with San Diego and schools and all of that, they worked really hard to get us move to a better neighborhood in San Diego. And to this day, I mean, they run it's a transportation company with Lincoln Town Cars. This is pre-Uber, because they've been doing this since I was in the 5th grade. And they don't just own it, they also do the driving. So they wake up at 4 a.m. to midnight sometimes, and for 25 years. So, but because of that, my sister and I have the opportunities that we have. So.
Hi, Dad, but I love you too, Mom.
I'm not even going
my mom. And the reason being is it definitely ties into my philosophy, my outlook on life. Like I said before, I alluded to the fact that she is a leftist, but the principles that she instilled in me, it really got me to where I am today. And I definitely have to give her credit for it.
bowling with any president, living or dead. Amanda, who would it be?
Calvin Coolidge.
Brandon?
Calvin.
Andrea, bowling with any president, dead or alive, who would it be?
I'm going to say Reagan, because he was inaugurated the year I was born, so it's a good year.
Amanda, what's a secret talent no one knows about?
Oh, God. I can do the splits.
That's good.
Really? Okay.
No. I was a cheerleader, so that's the first thing that came to mind.
I don't know if secret talent? I don't speak of it often, but I'm trilingual, and most people don't know, because I'm speaking English, and I'm in, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm not that talented. But I guess I could say I have a genuine love for getting relationship advice.
That's good. That's good.
I love it.
That's good. I like that.
My friends that come to me all the time, I definitely
What room are you in? I'm sorry. I agree because I embarrass them often. Predictions on 2016. Who wins the nomination for us? And who wins general? Brandon?
No.
From the way things go. I mean, I know polls they fluctuate, but it's going to be Trump.
Okay.
If he wins the nomination, we're going to lose Hillary.
Okay.
Amanda?
I think with the momentum of Trump and his performance on Super Tuesday, I think Trump is going to be the nominee. I do think Hillary Clinton will be the Democratic nominee. And I think that Trump will win because I think Hillary is very easy to beat. She is under FBI investigation for crying out loud. If you can't win against her, who can we win against? Got it.
Though I'm not happy to say that that's my prediction at all. I'm probably with Brandon, unfortunately. I mean, I hope Cruz can get in there, but it seems like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Trump gets all the media attention, and it's just he's seeped into everyone's consciousness because of how much attention he gets. But I do feel that if he gets elected, Hillary's going to win.
Okay.
Yeah.
On a scale of 1 to 5, how good of a dancer are you?
0. Like, not even a 1 to 0.
But he gives relationship advice. He can't dance.
Hey.
All right.
The exact signatures, Brandon.
I'm a 3. I love to dance, but I am not coordinated.
Member Nene.
What's that?
You guys don't know Nene? The song?
If you play it, I'll recognize it.
No, I do not.